Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Mohammad Ghandehari. I have PhD in Islamic Studies from University of Tehran. I am going to present a part of my research work on materials on the falsification of Quran in Kitab Sulaym. I am terribly sorry for the technical issues that happened. And I am grateful to Dr. Sani and other organizers for providing me with the opportunity to present my work here. Please go next, Mr. Sani. Yeah. Professor Hussein Mudarresi Tabatabai has a precious article on earlier stages of Shia belief in falsification of the Quran with the name of Early Debates on the Integrity of the Quran. As he has articulated in his article, there are three different phases in early Shia belief in falsification. The first phase is about the Shia belief in Ali's collection of the Quran. According to a recent research of Saifuddin Kara, this phase is the earliest phase and could be dated back to the 1st century. The second phase is about utilizing Sunni reports on the falsification of Quran polemically by the early Shiite Mutakallimun as a ready weapon to silence their opponents. In this phase, we can see that the Shiite doesn't have any belief in the falsification of Quran, but rather they seems to refer to the Sunni reports as a polemical tool for arguing in the sake of their belief. And in the third phase, we can see that in the late 2nd and early 3rd century, many Sunni readings, narratives, and traditions penetrated in Shia hadith and were mistakenly attributed to Imams. So, in the beginning of the middle of the 3rd century, many Shiite traditionists tend to believe in the authenticity of these narrations. Next slide, please. Yeah. We have materials on the falsification of Quran belonging to all these three phases. First of all, we can see a short element at the beginning of Hadith number 4 and 48, holding that Ali had an independent collection of Quran, but it's not necessarily contradictory to the authenticity of Quran. As Saifuddin Kara has shown, this belief is not couldn't be regarded as a contradiction to the belief in authentication, to the belief on the authenticity of Quran. In these reports, the first part mentions Ali's collections of Quran. It seems that Aban came across the tradition not from the chain of transmission that has been provided at the beginning of these narrations. We will scrutinize these narrations at the last slides of our presentation. For the second phase, there is a long tradition, Hadith number 11, which is about the polemical reference to Sunni reports on the falsification of Quran. Hadith number, I'm sorry. Yeah. In this phase, we can in this hadith number 11, we can see a long tradition about Ali's reference to his virtues, in which Ali tries to demonstrate that he has many allusion in his virtues has many roots in the different verses of Quran, And after that, we can see a long discussion about the compilation of Quran according to Sunni reports. And the last material in Kitab Sulaym is about hadith number 42. In this hadith, we can see some explicit pieces of evidence holding the belief in the falsification of Quran. So we can see all different phases of early Shia belief in falsification in Kitab Sulaym, but as Kitab Sulaym has a kernel historical core, has a historical core or has a historical kernel, we can't we can ascribe all of these phases, all of these references to the historical core. So in this research, in this presentation, I am going to scrutinize the dating of all these reports. Please, next slide. Let's have an introduction on Kitab Sulaym. Kitab Sulaym consists of 98 reports attributed to an alleged Shia disciple of Ali ibn Abi Talib by the name of Sulaym ibn Qais Hilali. Kitab Sulaym has been traditionally considered as the oldest surviving Shia book. As Ibn Nadim put it, Kitab Sulaym is the first book ever written in the Shia community, transmitted by Aban ibn Abi Ayyash and by nobody else. Kitab Sulaym is said to be transmitted only through his disciple Aban and nobody else. So the authenticity and the ascription of the book to the Sulaym himself has been cast into doubt in the Shia circles too. All of the Islamic sources giving any information about the author rely mostly on the introductory notes in the beginning of the book Sulaym. There has been some difficulties regarding the book in its current form. Please, next slide. I am going to survey some features of Kitab Sulaym. Kitab Sulaym is one of the 5 alleged extant books from the 1st century, and it is the original source of some later historians like Madaini. Kitab Sulaym is the unique source of some historical reports, and the composition of Kitab Sulaym is like a historical book. So we can conclude that Kitab Sulaym could be regarded as a historical source, not a hadith source. I will come back to this fact later. It seems that there is an old core preserved in the Sulaym corpora belonging to the 1st century. There are some clues showing this fact. First of all, prevalence of early discourses like many references to Moses and Aaron like in Quran. It's not usual in later sources, and absence of later Shia discourses and many other clues. Please, next slide. Yeah, there are many different manuscripts of Kitab Sulaym that they could be categorized in 4 different redaction families. Namely A, B, C, D. And these redactions have the main body of the Kitab Sulaym, but the Sulaym corpora is larger than the extant manuscript. Please, next. Yeah. There are some biographical information about Kitab Sulaym, and there are some Sulaym traditions in Sunni and Shia sources that quote some narrations in authority of Sulaym. Please, next slide. Dr. Swani, please go to the next slide. I can't see. Yeah. There are several problems regarding Kitab Sulaym. Modern scholarship has widely accepted that Kitab Sulaym ibn Qais as a whole is not authentic, and it couldn't be regarded as a 1st century book. Since the general skeptical approach of Goldziher to the authenticity of book, some academic research has tried to date some parts of Kitab Sulaym. Since the extant redactions are made up of several layers from different periods, these datings are not the same. However, as Kohlberg says in his introduction to Shia Hadith, there is room for further work on the authenticity of early texts of Shia Hadith, including Kitab Sulaym. The difficulties regarding the book go beyond the mere disagreement on its dating. The purported Sulaym ibn Ghais is historically unknown among the Hadith transmitter. In another word, the alleged author Sulaym ibn Ghais seemed to virtually unknown outside the corpus of Aban, and this fact alone casts doubt on the authenticity of the book. So, the third tradition is about the historical identity of the author of the book. Is Sulaym ibn Ghais a real person besides Aban ibn Abi Ayyash, the only transmitter of the book? Is his name a pseudonym or a real name? Several studies have paid attention to the work, but have never touched upon this question. None of these studies attempts to address who is the individual to whom Aban ibn Abi Ayyash referred as Sulaym ibn Ghais. I tried to address this question in my dissertation, in my PhD dissertation. I will provide a short survey of the result in the next slide. And after that, I will come back to the question of the historical kernel of the book, and we can discuss about the authenticity of the materials on falsification of Quran in Kitab Sulaym. The last question is about the original kernel in Kitab Sulaym. Is there any authentic core inside the extant book? How can we find if one of the Sulaym traditions at hand is part of the original core or later tradition? Considering the historical core of the book, there seems to be a consensus among some modern scholars. According to Mudarrisi Tabatabai, the original core of the work is preserved to a great extent in the current version, and is definitely from the reign of Hisham ibn Abdul Malik. He means the first quarter of the 2nd century. And according to Amir Muezzi, Muhammad Ali Amir Muezzi, in his recent work, its considerable antiquity of the considerable antiquity of Kitab Sulaym, partly authentic and partly presumed, has counted for much. So for research, it is safe to assume that there is an original core which belongs to the 1st or early 2nd century. In my PhD dissertation, I have tried to prove this fact, but here we can move on and assume this fact. In the next slide, I am going to provide a short review of my arguments regarding these issues. Please, next slide. Yeah. I tried to revise the usual approach to Kitab Sulaym by suggesting some liberating assumptions. I'm going to show you the traditional view about Kitab Sulaym and my suggestion to revise this view. First of all, I showed that Kitab Sulaym is written in forms of combined reports, generated from fusion of several distinctive short hadiths without isnad into a unique long version, often accompanied by a later introduction, a process which was prevalent among early akhbaris or early historians. Previously, noted in his article on hadith number 10 of Kitab Sulaym. So we can conclude that the hadiths of Kitab Sulaym should be mostly mursal or narrated with omitted intermediaries or without any isnad. That is, the author may have narrated the reports via other people indirectly. That is, he may not have been himself a companion of Ali. So the author of the book should be in generation of akhbaris in the late 1st century or in the 2nd half of the 7th century. On the other hand, following the methodology of regionalism proposed by Behnam Sadeghi, I tried to reconsider the birthplace of the author. While Kufa is the region in which the author is commonly assumed to have flourished, it seems that Kitab Sulaym has distinctly Basran contents and features. As Saifuddin Kara has previously noted to the Basran features of Kitab Sulaym in the report of number 4 and number 48. More importantly, the only transmitter of the book, Aban, and his disciple who transmitted the book through him, Umar ibn Uzayneh, Ma'mar, and other transmitters, are all Basran scholars. Consequently, it is reasonable to suggest that the historical Sulaym ibn Qais should have a strong Basran connection. And my last but not least suggestion is that Sulaym is a pseudonym by which the author tries to hide his real identity. Having this in mind, his nasab as Hilali could be regarded as a fake nasab too. Please, next slide. In my PhD, I proposed a new suggestion for the historical author behind the pseudonym Sulaym ibn Qais. Considering these aforementioned assumptions, I managed to find two historical figures with the same features as the author of the book. First, Sulayman ibn Qais Yashkuri, a prominent Basran scholar who was the most famous student of Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari and wrote his narration in a book. The second person is Abu Sadiq al-Azdi, a prominent Shia hadith narrator in Kufa who shares much in common with the author of Kitab Sulaym, including their Basran origin, their unique kunya Abu Sadiq, and their times of death and their exclusive narrations with the same wordings. There are numerous exclusive narrations narrated in authority of Abu Sadiq al-Azdi and which could be found in Kitab Sulaym. And there are many common socio-political tendencies in both figures. I propose that the best explanation for the relationship between these figures is that Sulayman ibn Qais al-Yashkuri used the pseudonym Sulayman ibn Qais al-Hilali in Basra for hiding his identity, and after migrating to Kufa, he preferred to use his kunya, Abu Sadiq. Please pay attention that the kunya of Sulaym ibn Qais al-Hilali is Abu Sadiq too, and there isn't any other Abu Sadiq in the whole history of the first century. And after that, he was known as Abu Sadiq al-Azdi because many migrants from Basra to Kufa were named as al-Azdi. This study may contribute to dating and to contextualizing of Kitab Sulaym as the oldest Shi'i book. However, the book we have at hand or existing recensions couldn't be completely attributed to Abu Sadiq or Sulayman ibn Qais Yashkuri because there are several later layers in the book, and it is also difficult to determine with certainty whether all the strata of the text were originally part of the work by Abu Sadiq or were added at a later time. Please, next slide. Till now, we can conclude that it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that by name Sulaym, Aban was referring to a real person in his time, and there are several parts of the current work could be ascribed to the historical Sulaym. Following the most source critical method, I showed that there is an original kernel in Kitab Sulaym which can be ascribed to Aban, if not Sulaym himself. According to Mudarrisi Tabatabai, the old core of Kitab Sulaym is preserved in most of the manuscript, even at the cost of obvious contradictions, and later accretions seem always to have been in the form of insertion and additions rather than replacement and alterations. Please, next slide. Perhaps about the reports of Kitab Sulaym, I am going to provide an example here. The composite feature of hadith in Kitab Sulaym is more apparent in some of them. For example, in hadith number 21, we can see that the structure of the matn could be regarded as 5 different elements composed together. Please pay attention to the qala at the beginning of each element. There isn't any technical word in the body of the report, and there isn't any later discussion or later elements in the body of the math. But one can discern some later additions at the beginning of the report. Please pay attention to Haddathani at the beginning of the report. You can see that this report is narrated in authority of Sulaym, in authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Salman, Abu Zar, and Miqdad. But these different elements of the math could be found outside the book in authority of different scholars or different muhaddisun of the first century. So we can guess that the beginning part of this report is a later addition, but the remaining part of the body of the text could be regarded as a kernel part of Kitab Sulaym. Fortunately, we have more tools to find and discern the kernel of the Kitab Sulaym in many other reports. Please, next slide. A ubiquitous feature of Kitab Sulaym is the repetition of textual elements in different hadiths. For example, you can see here two different hadiths of Kitab Sulaym, hadith number 16 the right side and the hadith number 36 on the left side. Due to different lines of transmissions, some textual elements of the original kernel transmitted in different ways, resulting in different redactions of a same report, or even different reports containing similar elements which have the same wording. For example, you can see here that the first section of these two reports are the same, have the same wording, but they are different. Please pay attention to the underlined word. They are different because the left side, the report on the left side, is reported on the authority of Miqdad, but the hadith on the right side is reported on the authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So the redaction is, or maybe the later transmitter of the one of these two reports was forced to harmonize or make coherent all the verbs and change the pronouns from the first person to the second person. You can see these changes in the underlined words. These neglected facts makes room for us to do some intertextual research. For example, comparing the parallel text of these two hadiths, one can see the common parts and the added elements highlighted in the left side, which could be regarded as a later addition. You can see this section, which is shown in a red highlight, which is absent in the right side and could be regarded as a later addition. Moreover, we should pay attention to the variant at the beginning of these two hadiths. The hadith number 36 is narrated in authority of Miqdad, but the right hadith is narrated in the authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib himself. It is interesting that Miqdad hadn't much hadith, and I think all of his hadith is less than the number of fingers. So it could be regarded as a fake ascription in the left side. And most importantly, we should pay attention to the different redactions or different recensions of these two reports. The reports number 36 could only be found in the manuscript family of A, B, and D. But the right report could be found only in the manuscript family or the redaction family of C, and they don't have a common text. These different families of manuscript. So we can pay attention to the common wording of the kernel of the book, which is similar in two different redactions, and it could be safe to assume that this common wording could be ascribed to the kernel of the book. By having this in mind, we are able to discern some later layers of the text. From now on, I am going to show you the different materials on falsification of Quran. And by using these methods, I am going to show you that we can discern the authenticity, and we can check that whether is it correct to ascribe these materials to the Sulaym himself or to the kernel of the book, or we can't. Let me share my screen. Could you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah. I am starting from the third phase, or the last material on the falsification of Quran, which is the most explicit one. We can see here hadith number 42 in the middle of the page here. Could you see my highlights?
Yeah, we can see it.
Thank you. I have compared the recension of Kitab Sulaym, the extant redactions of the manuscript, with one of the earliest quotations of the same hadith in Kitab Ad-Durr al-Nazim. And there is a medieval book with the title of Ad-Durr al-Nazim, which has been written by Yusuf ibn Hatem al-Shami in the 7th century after Hijrah, which has preserved an early redaction of the same report with some variants, which can help us to determine the historicity or the authenticity of the materials on falsification of Quran. I have tried to compare the similar parts by highlighting the text in the right and the left side. We can see some variants on the right side and the left side. For example, the paragraph here, which I selected, is absent in the right side. The reason why we can't see the paragraph here could be about the disorderliness of the parchments, or the early parchments of the Kitab Sulaym maybe have been misplaced or replaced or substituted, and the order of the book here can be rearranged maybe. We can see the same paragraph in other hadith number 25. So we can assume that this selection is inserted here from the another page of the kernel of Kitab Sulaym. After coming down, we can see another variant here on the left side in the extant manuscript of Kitab Sulaym. There is a long attestation of the name of the 12th Imam of Shi'i Imam, and this part is totally absent here in the recension of Ad-Durr al-Nazim. As the next example, we can see a long paragraph here, which is totally absent in the right part. This paragraph is a reference to the 12 descendants of Ali, which is, according to Mudarrisi, is amongst the later additions and the later layers of Kitab Sulaym. And after coming down, we can see some minor variants in the text. For example, here there is a comparison in the history of Islam and some stories of Israelites like Aaron's. We can see in the left side, the comparison is made to Aaron and his Ahl Bayt, but his Ahl Bayt is absent in the right side in Ad-Durr al-Nazim. And after coming down, we can see another one here. In the left side, it is غير هارون وولده غير هارون وولده ونفر قلیل من أهل بیته. But in the right side, غير هارون وحده, the mere Harun. We can guess that these minor additions are later insertion in the script of Kitab Sulaym. And most importantly, important variant here is about the discussion about salvation. As we have shown in my PhD dissertation, one of the tendency of the author of Kitab Sulaym was about the inclusiveness of salvation, and he insisted that the salvation is not exclusive to any Islamic section. But we can see here in the extant manuscript of Kitab Sulaym, there is some alteration which has been made in order to alter this message, this inclusive message, in order to show that everyone who doesn't follow Ahl Bayt al-Nabi is not among the is not among the people who goes to paradise. And we can go to the most important part, the reference to the falsification of Quran. You can see here in the orange highlighted paragraph, there is an explicit reference to the falsification of Quran. It is here. قال يا معاوية إنه ضاع من القرآن شيء. O Muawiyah, some parts of the Quran have been omitted. The whole paragraph is absent in the early quotation of Ad-Durr al-Nazim, and the whole reference to the falsification of Quran is absent here. And it is interesting that this later insertion has made some mistake or errors in the final part of the tradition. You can see that the final part of the tradition is narrated in authority of some members of Ahl al-Bayt, but in the extant manuscript of Kitab Sulaym, these texts, the remaining part of the text, is narrated on the authority of Ibn Abbas, but in the quotation of Ad-Durr al-Nazim, the same wordings and the same texts are narrated in authority of Hassan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. It is obvious that these texts couldn't be narrated in authority of Ibn Abbas because it is contradictory to belief of early Shi'i belief. Dr. Usmani, have I enough time to show another example?
It depends on how long it takes.
Maybe 10 minutes.
Actually, you have used 7 minutes from after speaker.
So we don't have enough time. Let me provide an overview of the whole argument. There is another material on the falsification of Quran at the final part, at the final segments of Hadith number 11. It is the Hadith number 11 in the right side here. It's about some munashadeh or some arguments of Ali referring to the referring to his virtues in a large audience in the reign of Osman, and we can see the same arguments and the same wording and the same text in another hadith of Kitab Sulaym in the middle of a report, a historical report in authority of Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. And it is interesting that the right side and the left side are the same argument, the same words, the same sentences, but because these pages has been inserted inadvertently in the middle of the report 25, and the authority of this report was different from Ali ibn Abi Talib, the fabricator or the later transmitter has tried to make coherent, to make the text coherent and to make some alteration in the pronouns. For example, you can see آخا بینی و بین نفسه, and you can see here فآخا بینه و بین نفسه. You can compare all the wordings, all the remaining wordings, and they are the same, but all the pronouns have been changed in order to make it coherent in the left side. Now, by comparing, by doing some intertextual research here, we can find that the historical kernel of Hadith 11 is only the argument of Ali ibn Abi Talib on the virtue, on his virtues, which ends here. Let me show you here. Yeah, it's the final part. It's the final part of Hadith 11, and the remaining part is only transmitted through only one families of manuscript. I mean, after finishing the arguments of Ali ibn Abi Talib, we can see the remaining part, including the discussion on the falsification of Quran, only transmitted in the in Nusakh or in the manuscript, in the redactions of Aleph and Jim, and it is totally absent in the manuscript family of B and D, and it is only present in A and C. There are many pieces of evidence showing that the remaining part has a literary characteristics and could be regarded as a fabrication, as a later fabrication. It presents later discussions and later ideas belonging to the 3rd century, and we can see here a reference to the Alice collection, and after that there is a reference to the Sunni reports, to the famous Sunni reports on the compilation of Quran, and we can discuss it later in maybe in a later session, that all of the remaining part of Hadith 11 couldn't be regarded as a historical kernel of Kitab Sulaym. Thank you for paying attention to my presentation, and I'm very sorry for the technical issues I had.